Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? We're live on YouTube, on Facebook. Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm just gonna, let's go.
Hi, yeah, I'm seeing some comments. Cool. Good morning, Ken.
Oh,
Where are you
already.
from? Yeah,
Okay.
cool. There, people are ready. It's great. On the ball.
All right.
Good,
Hi,
good evening, I
everyone.
suppose, in the West. Yeah.
Yeah, in the West, it's Thursday evening. There. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for tuning in our live stream this Thursday evening. How's everyone doing? I'm so happy to see all your smiling faces here. This is Twiggy. I'm a video journalist here at iChongqing. We talk a lot about China topics, conversations around politics, infrastructure, social benefits, and the dynamics between megacities and countryside. Anything you name it. So all these exciting changes in China during this new challenging era. So if you're interested to know anything about China or curious to see what a powerful country like China is going to impact the world, shape the future, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have many more interesting and exciting comments coming, and including live stream, vlogs, etc. So, how's everyone doing?
Great.
Okay.
Real good.
Great. Okay, good. So today we're going to address the big elephant in the room, something that we or the world have to live with for the past 2 years. So today we're going to talk about the current attitude towards the way we deal with COVID-19. And today we're joined by two amazing guests, Alex from the YouTube channel Alex Absolute, and Kai, a Canadian writer. So without further ado, let's start our conversation today. So let's give the audience some brief self-introduction about ourselves. So maybe let's start with Kai.
Oh, hi. Okay, good morning. Well, my name is Kai. I write under the name Jora Kai, a little bit like Angelina Jolie, I guess, but not as attractive. I've been in China, in Chongqing, since 2014. So it's about 8 years now. And unlike most of my teacher friends, I've actually been at the same school for the entire time. Maybe I'm just too paranoid to change visas. I've heard it's quite difficult, and I really don't like paperwork. But they've been a great school for me, and it's been a lot of fun. So I've been teaching high school at like an international school for 8 years. And a couple of years ago, I got the opportunity to kind of sub in as a bit of an editor for some news. And that got me in the loop of kind of getting more in touch with what's going on in China and Chongqing, which was really interesting because a lot of the time, my less than perfect Chinese sort of keeps me just in the classroom and at home and maybe in a taxi to my pizza shop or Ben's bar or something like that. So it was interesting to kind of find out more of what's going on in the rural area and the mega city of Chongqing. And that, of course, led me to this topic today. When the outbreak happened in January, end of January 2020, I was kind of editing some news items about the pandemic. And although I have a couple of cousins and uncles that are doctors, my medicine skill was not super deep, pathology and viruses and that kind of thing. So out of curiosity, I started doing a lot of research into what was going on and how coronavirus works and all that. I remember the first day someone said we had a novel virus, and we thought, oh, like Harry Potter, and really didn't understand, what does a novel virus mean? What is all of this stuff? So I started doing a lot of research, and a lot of it was very dramatic and kind of panicked. I can be a little bit like that. I think I told some friends I thought it was a zombie apocalypse at the beginning, and they didn't appreciate my flair for the horror drama. But as things progressed, I kind of learned a lot more and started writing a diary. And I had Canadian journalists actually ask me to go on CTV News. Yeah, that's a second edition. It's actually coming out. The first one was released in Beijing. I have a copy here too, in 2020. And this is the Canadian edition. The original one was English and Chinese. This is the English one. It's got lots of pictures and about my life in Canada before the pandemic, life mostly in Chongqing during the pandemic. And I was approached by CTV News Canada and iChongqing to syndicate my sort of diary into a column to kind of share the experience. For me, it was really interesting just to kind of show my life. And in my moment of fear, I kind of was worried. I thought, like, I'm a writer, but I had many drafts of manuscripts on my shelf, and none of them were novels or movies yet that the world could enjoy. And I thought, oh no, this is my like Hemingway Snows of Kilimanjaro moment where I'm looking at the end of my life, and I had so many dreams and they're not going to happen. Hey, at least I'll write a diary so my family will know what happened to me. But luckily, due to Chongqing's wonderful response, I quickly realized I probably wasn't going to die, at least of COVID this year. And I started to share the good news about masks, which started this really complicated relationship with the CDC. And I had friends in public health and in Toronto and this kind of thing. And they were really pushing back on masks. And I had one person who said, "Look, Kai, what do you, your blog is really nice, charming. You're a nice, cute little writer. You do a nice little column. What was your degree in? English and creative writing?" "Yeah, I have a degree in science. I've been doing public health in Canada for 20 years. Cut it with the masks hysteria. We know they don't work." And that was what I was dealing with as the pandemic started. So it was quite interesting, being in this position of being a teacher and a writer, documenting the pandemic start in China, and I actually kept it going once kind of spread to Canada and other countries. We had about 12 to 15 bloggers around the world in different countries, Canada, America, Australia, Italy, UK, Ghana, Africa, Buenos Aires, Argentina, just talking about how it kind of started there, how they were dealing with it. And it was quite interesting. And that was all on my website. theinvisiblewar.co was my original title for Kai's diary. But with current, tensions, I think, geopolitical tensions with Trump posturing against China and everything, I think everyone decided Kai's diary was a little bit of a more peaceful title to promote for the book. And it also, it was my diary. So that's kind of how it got me to here. And it's been interesting in the last year. I keep writing. I'm working on a new novel now. I wanted to do something that's more kind of positive, not just talking about death and viruses. And I've actually had the opportunity to speak at the World Forum for China Studies, Human Rights Convention in Chongqing about human rights and COVID-19. And it's been really interesting how just taking the chance to kind of speak out and share my life has gotten me onto different places to meet a lot of really interesting people. And with you here this morning and to meet Alex.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So
My
we're going to
pleasure.
we're going to turn to Alex. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience today?
Yeah, hi. I probably can't introduce myself quite as well as that. I will just. My name is Alex. I'm from the UK, and I've been here in Wenzhou, China, which is in the south. We're about 500 kilometers just below Shanghai. I've been here for just a little bit longer than Kai. I've been here since beginning of 2013, so I guess just over 8.5 years now. I was a teacher for many years, and then this year I finally made the jump to just being a full-time, I guess I would say filmmaker. It sounds cooler than everybody wants to call themselves a content creator. I like making videos. Basically, I get that's what I do for a living now. It's what I intended to do. I'll be honest, I never was very fond of teaching, but it was what got me here to China. My China story is probably different to everybody else's because I didn't ever plan to come to China. I just saw an opportunity came up and decided it would be a fun thing to try because you can always go home if you don't like it. And I kind of came here, and as soon as I came here, I was like, "This is cool. I like this." And then I've just kind of stayed. Now I've settled right down. I've got got married to a local, had children, bought houses, cars. So I don't think I'm going anywhere. It's some of the best things you'll ever do in life, just by these kind of random decisions. I like to live my life, half of it planning and half of it just doing impulsive stuff. So I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen China's changed a lot since I came here in 2013 until now. It has changed so much. It's incredible. It's developing an amazingly fast pace. It's been an eye-opening. But yeah, in a nutshell, that is pretty much me.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. So I'm going to do a self-introduction about myself. So as for me, hi everyone, I'm Twiggy, a video journalist here in iChongqing. So for the past 3 years, I've lived in the States, in New York for my master program study, and I have recently come back to China this year in July. So you can see I'm that person who have experienced a little bit both of the world during the pandemic. So I think it's interesting how when the pandemic hits, we all are in different places. You guys are in China, but I was in, U.S. So when I want to first start off by asking Kai and Alex, what was your experience in here in China during pandemic? How about your family? what was the situation of the country that they were in, and what are some of the differences that you notice in terms of governors' reaction towards COVID-19? Maybe we can start with Kai.
Okay, sure. Well, it was interesting for sure. At the beginning, I think anyone in China, whether you're a foreigner like an expat or a local Chinese, we had a very unique kind of introduction, because the rest of the world could look, and whether they took the knowledge we gained or not, they could say, well, this happened in China. We had this experience coming out of the Wuhan lockdown. Wuhan was the first publicized lockdown. We don't know, the origin of where the virus originated, anything like that has not been established. But as far as we know, Wuhan was this big situation that alerted everyone in China. And being in Chongqing, we were just like 850 kilometers away at the beginning of the Spring Festival. So it was like a shock. I remember reading about a mathematical model out of Hong Kong that predicted that Chongqing would be the next epicenter after Wuhan, because we were so close at the beginning of Spring Festival.
Yeah.
We literally had people driving, like people from Wuhan saying, oh, let's spend Spring Festival in Chongqing. Let's get in our car and drive for 8 hours or 10 hours, and we're going to spend a week in Chongqing and this kind of thing. And so it was like frightening at the beginning, and we had no knowledge. Like we had no idea if it was like a zombie apocalypse or a bad flu or something in between. And so it was a little bit shocking, and we had really the weight to carry. I think people in Wuhan would have had more of that. It was an extreme situation. But so being in Chongqing was probably pretty mild compared to Canadians I know or anyone in Wuhan. But there was still a lot of that, like paranoia and uncertainty. But I was really, really enthusiastic about the response. Within about a week or so, the Chongqing government had really stepped up. They decided they had discouraged travel, non-essential travel into Chongqing, even to the point of having police officers on the highway kind of saying like, hey, if you're coming in from the east, if you're headed, from the Wuhan direction to Chongqing, maybe just turn around and go home. I know it's Spring Festival, but this is an emergency. And so from the beginning, we kind of saw the desire of people to sacrifice their own wishes, kind of like travel and convenience, for the greater good of, it's smart and safe to settle in, not travel too much, have a lockdown, wear masks to be considerate to other people. And all of that came very quickly. Of course, there was some criticism from the West that Wuhan could have moved a little bit faster. And I know that's been a point of contention. I think they had a big hot pot dinner that was known to be a super spreading event or something like that. But I can imagine, a big bureaucracy like a super city in China. It's not so easy to just make this kind of decision. People want to see the evidence first. You don't want to let rumors carry you away. You really need a balanced approach. But one thing China did incredibly well, I think, was once the people in charge had decided, this is urgent, this is an emergency, they basically said, okay, this Spring Festival, everyone will stay at home with your immediate family. Don't travel too much. And later on, we could talk about, New York Times is still tweeting to criticize China for discouraging international travel during a pandemic. And I recently kind of took some fire on them. I shot some replies to say, how can you criticize 1.5 billion people from not wanting to move around during a pandemic? How many lives did that choice save? So I think, of course, we had a unique experience in China being to learn all about this on the fly. But we learned a lot. We learned really quickly. And being someone that was trying to share this news with I had a column on CTV News' homepage for about 8 weeks. And there was a lot of people that thought it was very interesting, but a lot of people also really came at me and said, why are you telling people to wear masks? That's crazy. We know masks don't work. And now, of course, they've changed their mind and they feel quite embarrassed. But there was a lot of pushback against the things China was doing for one reason or another.
Yeah. So how was your family in Canada doing at that time?
I think they were doing well. Luckily, everyone in my immediate family listened to me. They took my advice. I had my father and some different people order masks on Amazon, this kind of thing. So they had these kits I made, said you want hand sanitizer, you want masks, you want to order a couple months worth of food, just be prepared for anything because it could be very chaotic. And we saw in some places, the shelves were empty, and even weird things that we never really understood, like the toilet paper craze.
Oh, that's the things I don't understand at all.
Yeah, especially in Australia, some countries were totally out of toilet paper. It was mental. I don't know if they thought the virus was going to affect them in a different way. But
that's the most nutritious thing when you're locked down, right?
I suppose, yeah, it's recycled.
That was
paper,
also a thing in the U.S. as well when I was in New York. It was just the empty shelf, no toilet paper. Yeah, I know, right? So how about Alex? How was your experience in China during this pandemic?
Similar but different, I guess. For me, it started off a slow pace and then kind of picked up because I can remember when it started because it was Spring Festival holidays, so we were all at home. Like I remember because we have a nice balcony that looks out across the wetlands and it looks into the complex, and I remember that we just had some kind of thing where they'd been going around because there was some kind of dung fever outbreak just down the road. So they'd been around gassing like bushes and stuff. And then that kind of disappeared. Like, and then a week later, I remember my wife just saying to me, well, there's some kind of virus outbreak in Wuhan. And I was like, I don't really know where Wuhan is. Never heard of it before. Okay, cool. And it was kind of talk of it being a little bit serious, not to go mingling in large groups. So we went to a meal with friends and stayed at a house. I guess it was like 3 to 4 days. It suddenly went from being more serious. Because then a lot of people, I remember, they had people in hazmat suits outside here with these things. Huge amount of mosquitoes, and they were in gas the whole complex. It was kind of very post-apocalyptic, and it was just finding out. It was at first it was hard to know what was going on, and I guess because his child was the first responders, so they weren't following anybody else's lead. They were just having to be caught on the fly, and they responded very well. Like as soon as everything, as soon as China got onto what was happening, they locked it down pretty fast. We hadn't got cards, so we were only allowed to go out every other day for like a limited amount of time. We just got to stay at home. You had to just like, you know, they went round and like, because Wenzhou here, I don't know if you guys were aware, but Wenzhou was the second worst hit place outside of Wuhan because so many people from Wuhan that work in Wuhan live in Wenzhou, because I guess from what I gather, Wuhan is more like, my wife explained, it's like a hub city. So lots of people come from around surrounding areas to work there because it was a place where a lot of business and stuff was done. So there was a lot of people that were working there, and you know, they came back to Wenzhou. I think it's something like 34,000 came back to Wenzhou from Wuhan, and a lot of the people in the complex where I live. So there was a lot of people. There was a lot of stuff where people turned up in the middle of the night in hazmat suits to take away people that might have needed just to be checked. But they rolled out everything very fast. It was really reassuring to see how fast everything was rolled out. They had systems for checking who was where. They had the health codes. They had the temperature checks rolled out. And although it caught everybody kind of off guard, China, I thought it was quite impressive. They did a great job of locking it down and then and getting a handle on what things were doing. It was strange because the rest of the world was just kind of watching and not doing anything, because I regularly spoke to my parents, and because like I WeChat called them a lot, and they were saying, oh, nothing's happening here yet. But luckily they kind of, by the time something did start happening in England, they'd already got a pretty good grip on what was going on and what precautions needed to be taken, because my sister lives here in Shanghai as well, so they got a pretty good like idea of what was going on from us. So yeah, it was interesting. It was I don't know. It was well handled. It was I think it was handled as well as it could have been. In my opinion.
I think at least it's great that your family are well informed by you of like how dangerous this virus was. Well, I feel like I was in a completely opposite situation than you guys, because I was studying in New York while my family is in China, you know, during pandemic. So to have seen all those like serious precautions that China have taken in order to combat this virus, I knew how dangerous this virus was, and there was already, cases in the U.S. I was in New York, and then in New York as well as, but all the schools in New York, because I was studying in Parsons at that time, are still yet to cancel the in-person classes. So we still go to campus. Very few people in New York were wearing masks. At that time I was, and a lot of people in Chinatown were. But because the mask in American culture is something that, for some people who is sick to wear, right? So that's also the reason of why a lot of like hate crimes happened during that time towards Asian people. And but we're literally just being good citizen of wearing masks, protecting other people's life and ours. And when they finally realized how serious this virus was, and it was just like way too late. For a city like New York, I think a world traveling hub, it should be the first city to have lockdowns when a dangerous virus like COVID-19 appears. And the first, COVID-19 case was confirmed on March 1st of 2020, and then New York quickly just become the epicenter of pandemic. And they were just like a
terrible there. Yeah.
What?
Sorry to interrupt. It must have been terrible there. I was studying quite closely the different cities at the time, and of course, Wuhan was very bad. Northern Italy was very, very bad, and then New York was a real tragedy, from what I understand. It must have been really, really horrible.
I used to live on the First Avenue and 36th Street, which is Midtown, and then two blocks away is the New York. I think it's the New York University Hospital, which is where they take in most like COVID patients. And you can just literally see all those pictures on the news where they have like, dead body and just loads of dead body. They don't have enough space to freeze them. Mm-hmm. And it was just like such a tragic, scenes to watch. And
we had that in Toronto, Canada for a little while too, but not on the scale of New York. No, but New York is such an international city. I think you're absolutely right. They could have taken more precautions. That was the one thing, if you want to talk about the difference in approach between Western and Eastern countries, I feel like China, although it may, because it's such a large country and, a lot of bureaucracy to manage, from the top kind of thing, took a while to clue in. But once they did, they really spared no expense to put the people's lives first and really take a precautionary principle. So things like masks, the idea that it could be airborne, were all taken very seriously. Whereas people I was talking to in the West were doing more of a downplaying kind of thing to say, well, people maybe have come from traveling recently, but until we have 1,000 confirmed cases, we're not going to really worry about it. We're not going to, they just had this the opposite of precautionary, more reactionary maybe. And I think the places where it was really, really bad, we can see that they just got like swarmed, they got overwhelmed. And precautionary approach.
I think that's exactly what happened in New York. It's just like I think once they realized how serious it was, Andrew Cuomo at that time, the president of the state of New York State,
governor
and
he was
the governor, he was doing braving every day, and he was just literally kind of have like a fight with Trump of saying like, where are the masks? Like we can't get like enough gear for our health profession. And I think it's just like the system itself in America, it's kind of broken to combat a virus like this, to face a world health issue like this. So it was just like sad at that time. I just feel like a little bit angry and also like powerless to change, when the system is already broken and some people are just like, less poor informed or just ignorant about the situation that was going on at the time. So
I think it's very sad. For sure, Go ahead.
Yeah, go
ahead. My policies is helpful because I have almost zero interest in it, but I think if I remember correctly, there was policies, or there was at least the idea discussed of having a pandemic response. I can't remember if it's in the UK, my memory is so bad. But, and like a year or two before the pandemic actually happened, people were like, "No, we didn't need that. Divert the funds, anything else." It's just terribly bad timing. I guess nobody's actual fault, but in hindsight, if they just put that money there, there would have been a lot better response. Sure. That's it.
Okay, so it's okay. I think Alex, your audio is like being cut a little bit, but that's fine.
It's breaking up a little bit. I think
it's breaking up a little bit, but
okay. came back
Okay.
to politics. Okay.
One thing I want to mention, maybe we had a bit of a segue from the tragedy of New York. It's not exactly appropriate to follow up the New York tragedy with this, but I recently got a memory on my Facebook someone had shared, and I thought it was just so interesting to kind of look at the people's responses to masks. I'm sorry, this is just on my phone. Can you see this this dinosaur? Let me bring you another one
Yeah.
here. This kind of approach people had. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's there you go. Very bizarre masks options, you know, from shower curtains to grapefruits, and maybe I'll send it to you on the StreamYard or something. We can try it out. It was just like people had the most absurd responses to masking because there wasn't a culture in place. I think that's one thing China had that was really beneficial. China, I think Japan as well, maybe South Korea. Like when people get a bad cold, they wear a mask so other people around them don't get sick, and that's just like a basic courtesy. And I know in my country of Canada, it's not so popular or common. So when people started saying, you know, maybe you should wear a mask, they were wearing like superhero masks or just making their own bizarre, you know, dinosaur horse face kind of thing. And the pictures coming out at the time were like absurd. It was like this gallows humor, like dark humor, where people thought, you know, there might be a pandemic, maybe we'll die. I'm going to put on a horse helmet and go buy some vegetables or something. It was totally absurd. Like it was a very strange time. And of course, the idea that the West was saying don't wear masks and then changed their mind and said wear masks, I still never really understand the flip-flopping, because I feel like it didn't help the people that were already distrustful of the experts. Like I think that was another advantage in China, is that people generally listen to doctors and science, and people generally follow the government advice. And of course, in a pandemic, like having everyone listen to the experts was the best thing we could have done. And in places where people wanted to exercise the right to protest the restrictions, I'm sure those were super spreader events in their own. If you had 10,000 people in the street screaming, "We don't want to wear masks, I'm breathing all over you," I mean, that's not going to help, right?
That's just the protest I was saying like every day in New York, to be honest with you. I think that, you had a point that there's definitely a divide towards certain topic in this world, just like for our experience of living different, you know, countries during pandemic. There's also a two attitude towards COVID-19. You know, there's the China's approach, which is also known as the zero tolerance policy. I think there's some misunderstanding about Chinese zero tolerance policy. I think to some people it might sound like, oh, one case in China just like froze, like the whole society and economy just stopped. But no, that's not the case. We control the spread infection rates of the virus by, you know, massive testing, target lockdowns, and put certain area under travel restriction. You know, that's what we mean by zero tolerance policy. Now, I think we can all share our experience in daily life here in China under zero tolerance policy. You know, how has it impact your life? Does it impact your life at all? And what was your opinion and take on China's zero tolerance policy towards COVID-19? And maybe let's start with Alex.
Okay, yeah. Is my audio back? Is everything okay now?
Yeah, your audio is still breaking up a little bit.
Okay. After this section, I'll try and maybe turn off my VPN. But let me know if you can't, if anything goes wrong.
How about let's do this? How about let's do this? Let's let Kai answer this question first, and you can log in and log out again, and try if your audio is better.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. All right,
so Twiggy, your question was about daily life, like daily life during the lockdowns?
Yeah, during the zero tolerance policy, actually.
Sure.
And what was your, you know, does it impact your life at all? And what was your opinion, take on the zero tolerance policy?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, we took it very seriously. Even amongst my friends, I had friends. My friend Andrea liked to take buses sometimes and do things. And I thought, like, you're in a bus? Like, you're in a bus during the pandemic? Like, we literally didn't even leave our house for the most part. We would go to, like, we had a little balcony. We could look down on the street and get fresh air. But we really took it quite seriously. I even got to the point of I was wearing like 2 masks and swim goggles to go to the grocery store. And we mostly ordered. We were
Wow.
very serious. Well, there was an article at one point that came out that said that the SARS-CoV-2 was 100 times more infectious through the ocular membranes, through the eyes, than the original SARS. And
Yeah,
that was
it
a
is.
point of news, I think, in the West that got totally lost because I think they had such a hard time just getting basic mask compliance that they thought we're not going to get people to wear goggles too, right? But I went full in. I had gas masks, I had swim goggles, I had various masks. Originally, because I when I was younger, I was actually in music, and I used to play at like festivals like Burning Man and stuff. And there you could have a dust storm every few minutes, just like in Mongolia kind of thing. So you needed to have respirators, masks, and goggles just for basic protection. So when it happened, I was actually lucky that I kind of just looked over to my shelf and said, okay, Shallon, here's a couple, my wife, here's a pair of goggles and a couple of respirators, and we're good to go. It's always helpful to be prepared. But yeah, we took it very, very seriously for 60 or 70 days. And then in around April 2020, I went back to school. I had been doing online classes for a couple of weeks, starting in maybe mid-March or something like that. To be honest, I think the very strong restrictions were really comforting. Like at first it was a big shock, but to have the government say, this is a big problem, we're going to take it very seriously, and non-essential people should stay off the streets. We just need to, because they were really scientific. Like I had graphs, even if you look at, I'll try to find the page at the back of my book here. They did a simple and informative things about, let's see here if I can find this one, the power of social distancing, this blue one. Is that clear here? No. I'm sorry. It's backwards.
That's fine.
Backwards. Yeah, the one about the people multiplying. The essential idea, the takeaway of that is that, if you can reduce the amount of people in the streets just talking by 50%, it's an exponential reduction on spread. So it was just a clear message from the government. If you don't have to work outside, work from home. If it's not safe to go to school, take online classes. If you can have one person in the house going to do groceries, it's safer than 3. And that simple idea of just trying to use like little fractions and exponential reduction in contact to limit the possibility of spread. When you couple that with like the incredible technology of China, we had these apps, the codes, the health code, vaccination codes when that came out. We have this incredible network of CCTV. In my book at one point, there was this really funny story about a guy that had a 14-day quarantine at home, and he went out at about the day 12 or 13 and said, I just want to stretch my leg and go to the park or something. And CCTV, like somehow, I don't know exactly how it worked, but somehow they figured out he was supposed to be home still. And they called his boss, and his boss called him and said, we're about to get fined a bunch of money in the company. You got to go home. You got like 20 minutes before we have to pay a fine. And he went, oh my, he's looking up. Oh my God. How? And it's in the West, maybe they would say that's an invasion of privacy or it's scary. To me, it felt very, very comforting. If you're not a criminal, I think the fact that the streets are very safe in China, that's a good thing. I don't personally go around pickpocketing people, so I'm happy to know the streets are safe. So I think in this case, our incredible technology, CCTV, whatever AI helps to maintain that, all of this technology and the codes. China is just forward thinking. We embraced all the technology. And so there was like a teacher from Harvard who got kicked out for not wanting to show her code or something. And everyone just thought that was incredibly foolish. Like, it doesn't matter if you're from Harvard or some big school, everyone has to work together to do a good job. And so it's a funny dynamic. The societies are different. I think in the normal times, people can have a healthy distrust of science, I guess. If they're not a scientist, that can be their opinion, whether masks work or not. But the fact that China generally works well together was an incredible advantage during the pandemic, and places where there was a lot more of this negotiation and discussion. During a normal time about normal policy, maybe it's okay to have that. But during a pandemic, I think we saw that you really need to work well together. And so, of course, in China, we did a great job. We all sacrificed. When it was safe, we all went outside. The alternative was like in places like Ottawa, Canada, where my father is, or Toronto. We had Premier Ford, who kind of had this sort of being joked about like a light switch rave policy. Everyone go home. 2 weeks later, it's starting to get better. Okay, everyone can go out again. 2 weeks later, it's starting to get worse. Okay, everyone go home. And in the long run, the on and off is much more damaging for the economy, for mental health, for everything.
Yeah.
And everyone and they have no confidence in the leadership. It's very uncertain. Whereas I think there was I'll finish with this point. There was like a study that showed in times of stress, and even with gambling, if you're going to lose money, you'd rather lose a little more money once than lose half your money over and over and over again. And people deal better with a 50-day lockdown and then relative freedom, as opposed to 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for years, which is what we saw sadly in a lot of the Western world.
Yeah, I think it's exactly this back and forwards policy definitely costs more than just one-time lockdown, and we're down for this. And so how Alex? So what do you think about your? I think your audio is getting better. So
It
what
should
was
be
your
okay now.
yeah, what was your experience in daily life here in China under the zero tolerance policy, and how has that impact your life? Does it impact your life at all? And what was
Uh,
your opinion and take on this like zero tolerance policy?
So I can maybe spark a little bit of controversy for me, because the zero tolerance and the lockdown was probably like I enjoyed my time because I wasn't very happy with being a teacher at that time. I didn't really like it. I wasn't working for a very good school, and I was pretty lucky. I know a lot of people were not lucky, but for me, I was pretty lucky because the school said, "We'll just keep full pay. You don't have to come in. You just have to work and teach online for, I think it was like 2 hours a week. Just be prepared to help out." And I was like, I'm all good with that. So for me, I got to spend a lot of time with my family. I don't really need to go out. As long as I got my family here, I've got a connection to the internet. I did a lot of live streaming, a lot of video making, and really started pushing myself in a direction that I wanted to go. So I used it. I kind of turned a negative into a positive by using it as an opportunity to forward myself, to study, to push my life to where I wanted it to be. And the zero tolerance policy worked well. You could see the results. Like for me, I say this to everybody, but for looking at Facebook and looking at back home in England and seeing the news with America and a lot of these other countries, it seems like since the pandemic started, it's never stopped there. Whereas for me, by the time May came around and we all went back to work, apart from like things like wearing masks in public, like large gatherings or a lot of large gatherings being generally cancelled, masks and taxis, a Didi, like if you call it a Didi, the Chinese Uber, you had to wear a mask. Apart from things like this and like showing a health code, life was pretty much back to normal. So for me, the actual pandemic part of it didn't last more than 3 or 4 months. And that was great because like Kai was just saying, it would just be such a pain if you had 2 years of just it constantly happening. Like now we have like occasionally they'll be like, oh, there's a flare up, and it'll be like one case they found somewhere. They step on it pretty fast. Like recently at Shanghai Disneyland, everything was dealt with super fast, and there was no big deal. It didn't really even affect anybody else's life, and I think that's because of the zero tolerance policy.
Yeah,
but
yeah, actually, I had a friend that was in Shanghai Disney that day. They got locked down. Shout out to Tracy if you're listening online. She's a student in Shanghai. We met at the World Forum for China Studies when I was there meeting other people. And yeah, so I got the inside scoop on that. And they just locked it down, tested everybody. She had to go home for a week or two, and then everything was good. Like the way they really do stomp on it, and it's great.
Yeah. Although I would say that I would like the zero tolerance policy to have worked and us to get back to normal soon, because I do kind of miss going back to see my parents. I haven't seen my parents in person for 2 years. I mean, you can video call them all you like, but it's not the same as actually seeing them. I would like life to go back to normal relatively quickly. I think we're done with it now. We've had the pandemic. Let's just
I think there's some good signs though. Good news, we don't know exactly yet, but there's a couple of things. What was it yesterday? I got a notification on my WeChat that China has granted emergency approval for the first COVID drug. I should really just I guess we'll have to check that out for yourself. They're monoclonal antibodies that attack the SARS-CoV-2 ability to reproduce, basically. So that's really, really good. There's a few countries in the West, they have a Pfizer one and a Merck one, and China's got its own emergency approval. So I think when we get to a situation where we can really fight the ability of it to become widespread outbreaks, and it gets to this individual situation where like one person is very sick with this virus and they could go to the doctor and get help, then I think I know in China we have a very famous Dr. Zhong Nanshan who's been speaking about sort of the government and science-based willingness, like what will it take to open up tourism again responsibly. And I think they mentioned, what was the statistic, when the fatality is like 0.01% or
Yeah.
0.1%, like 1 in 1,000 people who get sick will die. That might be an acceptable number, a morally, acceptable number, as opposed to, again, I mentioned the New York Times, who was recently criticizing China for the lost global economic tourism revenue. Just kind
I
of
was just about
suggesting.
to mention that.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny because the implicit, that's what I kind of attacked them for, because again, as a writer, and I want to say that I feel very lucky, like Alex, to be able to, I have really enjoyed. I made this wish. I hope I didn't cause the whole thing. Right before that spring festival, I said, this winter break, I really hope I can write a book. I hope I can rest my voice from my perpetual teacher voice from lecturing all the time. I hope I can take a long time to spend with my family. And then this happened, and I thought, oh no, is this my fault? Did I do this? Because here I am. I had this moment of a mortal fear. I'm going to die, and I thought, okay, I'm going to write my diary. And actually, I got a book deal. I got it published, which was a nonfiction sort of paranoid, paranormal virology thriller, kind of a nonfiction dystopian science fiction book. It was quite interesting how it turned out. And then I've got this Amos the Amazing coming out, like a magic fantasy. And so it's really shown me, like in the face of my own mortality at 40 years old, I thought, if I want to be a writer, I better write 5-10 books and get them done, because I'm not going to live forever. None of us will. And the time at home was very good. It was a different thing. I had a friend who was a worker at an NGO in Ghana, Africa, who hooked me up with an author named David Aleker, who was my blogger to show the Ghana perspective of the pandemic. But my friend Stephanie, she got COVID 2 or 3 times helping encampments of refugees. She would have like jeeps and be transferring people, and they have like developing country poverty situations that are very difficult in normal times. And all of a sudden, when the government wants to lock people down, there were countries and places where people were saying like, okay, so if we don't lock down, people will die, and if we lock down, people will starve to death because they're making daily food wages and they can't afford to stay home for 3 weeks. They don't have groceries for 3 weeks. And my heart goes out to people that had to make those kind of decisions, both in the policy and the individual home, because that is a real tragedy, and those are really hard decisions to make. I think all of us that were in countries, whether it's China or the UK or Canada, were more or less, we either had some savings, or the government, like in Canada, we had the CERB, the Curb or CERB fund. I think every Canadian got $2,000 basically to stay home and just to keep life progressing and be responsible and not spread the pandemic. And for a lot of people, that did mean they could, paint pictures or reevaluate their life or write a book on poetry or just kind of like think about what they want to do. And it was an incredible opportunity to kind of evaluate things, I think, as an environmentalist. And I've got a nonfiction book I'm working on next called Solar Punk, An Optimist's Guide to the Apocalypse is the rough title. I tried out my material at the World Forum on China Studies. They asked me to speak about, in Shanghai, this was in October, just before the Disneyland thing. I managed to find a nice window between Nanjing, small flare-up, and the recent Shanghai one. There was a little window where it was safe to go from Chongqing to Shanghai. And I'm glad that mostly things are, we have these little flare-ups. But yeah, the idea that we have an incredible challenge ahead of us with environmental issues, and most people just try to get through the day and don't have a lot of energy to think about it really. But I think the pandemic gave a lot of people pause for reflection, to think about their own lives and to think about these really big existential issues like the environment. And it was actually one more thing, like if we have time for a quick anecdote, in all the bizarreness of kind of reshaping my life, as a lot of us, Alex, you transferred to be a content creator, a filmmaker, right? I jump-started my book career. I met a friend named Ryan, who was he became a filmmaker for National Geographic. A lot of people pivoted in their life.
That's where I'd like to be.
World Forum in China Studies. Yeah, well, check it out. I'll link you guys up later if you want. He's a really interesting guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Ryan Knowlton in Beijing now, originally from Changsha. Shout out to Ryan if you're here or checking us out later. Wonderful guy. We're both D&D nerds. We bonded right away. But just like an incredible opportunity to reshape your life and to do things. I actually met Jean-Claude Van Damme, a childhood hero of mine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
What the heck, I'm an English teacher in China, and all of a sudden I got asked to do a COVID recovery and rebuilding conference, a digital conference in Canada about how to recover. And I thought, well, great. After months of people telling me to stop with the mask hysteria, someone wants to hear my advice. And my advice was basically, what do the smart doctors in China know, and how can I share that with my friends and family so that, I got this hat here. I've just been out all morning. How can the rest of the world take China's lead and recover? And one of the guests was Jean-Claude Van Damme. And his whole thing was, he was talking about how there are dolphins dolphins in the canals in Venice again. The birds in places like the nature and wildlife was making a recovery as the humans stayed in their homes, and he thought there was like a beautiful yin yang karmic balance of that. And he thought, take this moment to do the Jean-Claude Van Damme perfect splits and just try to relax and take a breath. And maybe that's what we need to think about solar power recovery and how we can, change the environment to be a more sustainable planet. Like, those are huge issues, but I think having the time to really think about it was incredible.
Yeah, that's great. So I think back to the point that you were talking about how people have this privilege of staying at home and how the other people have to, literally work to stay alive and to, not starve themselves. I think that was why I was a little bit angry at that time, back in the US, because people have all this privilege of staying at home and, not going out and not to, spread the virus, but they still choose their freedom over other people's lives. So that was, I was just like a little bit angry about that. And so back to the zero tolerance policy, I think we can all agree that it might, disrupt several, local economy. But our goal is to keep the society running as a whole, so we don't lose more life, because the current, 2% of death rate of this disease globally, despite the vaccination, is just simply not acceptable in China. So I would like to ask another question that is like, what do you think are some of the things that other countries can probably learn from China's zero tolerance policy? Maybe let's start with Alex about this question.
I think they should like a good takeaway would be that if you act quickly and you act in a not strict but in a very definite manner, then you will do better than if you flip-flop between different ideas. Also, communication and listening to people and leaving politics out of situations, because a lot of this has been just piggybacked by people with hidden political agendas and people making everything politicized that's not politicized, instead of just listening to other people and learning from other people. I've seen so many stuff with people that just blindly follow said news outlet. They said this and this is what it's like, and just for people to be aware and to make up their own minds, not just be, oh, Facebook said it, so it's got to be right, hasn't it? Like, some guy on Facebook said it, oh, that's exactly how it is. Just to people should learn to think for themselves, and follow advice from people that are credible, and not be like, nah, I know better than those people. I think that's the main takeaway, because there's been a lot of people that it's some of the wacky stuff you see on Facebook and on the internet. It's just kind of, I've lost my faith in humanity at some point. So I was like, how can people be that stupid? Like, honestly.
Yeah, and I think you had a point that never let these things into a political fight. I think you were facing some issue when you're trying to send some masks to the US, right?
Yeah, we tried to send a lot of masks. It wasn't entirely for like some humanitarian reason. Before anybody says, "Oh, Alex, you're such a such a nice guy," there were people that were asking, "Could you send these masks? And we're looking for this many masks. Can you arrange it?" And like, I could have. We could have stood to have made quite a bit of money, because there's a lot of factories here that I know my wife's friends own that were ready to supply masks, but they were being hindered, and only to the US. As soon as you said, could you ship them to Europe, they said, sure, no problem. We have all the relevant health and safety, I've forgotten what it's called now, the health and safety certificates that you have to have. But as soon as you said to America, they just said no. Like, Trump's policies have made it too hard, and we can still supply them, but you guys have to sort out all of that shipping yourself. And I'm not a shipping expert; it's not my job. It's completely not in my wheelhouse, so it never really happened. And that was because it just blew my mind that there was these policies that were brought about, and I guess it's like, once again, it's politics between the two countries. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it was politics between the two countries. And you'd have thought in a time of need, you'd relax that to get the supplies which you needed to the people that need it, but no. So it basically fell flat on its face. There was no point trying to go ahead and try and send them. politics ruined something which could have sent a lot of masks to people, essentially.
Yeah, I think the politics can also relate it to the retweet that Kai did, responding to New York Times that they were showing global tourism suffering from China's zero tolerance policy, and your response to that was quite interesting. And it seems like this media this day are really just like picking up like political fights. I was wondering what's your take on that, and what do you think are some of the things that countries can learn from China's zero tolerance policy?
Sure. Well, again, I always feel very torn if I'm picking on or being very critical of the New York Times, because I hope one day that they put me on their bestseller list for one of my books. As a writer, it's a very prestigious kind of thing. New York Times bestseller. How I don't know if they ever will, if they ever read my tweets about me criticizing their critique of China. I hope they can be more political about that, because my interest is health and not politically oriented. So of course, I do respect the journalists and writers that the New York Times celebrates, and I'm sure some of the writers are quite talented journalists and that kind of thing. But it does seem like the West is very quick to criticize China, as Trump, when he was in power, was very quick to blame Mexico or China for any problem with his economy. It always seems very convenient and easy to point the blame at someone else as a way, I guess that could even happen in my own home. If my wife came in and said, "Did you make this mess?" And I might have said, I think it's the dog. I think the dog must have done it. That's when it gets the heat off me, and Ben's in the bathroom for an hour cooling off, and I go, "Oof, that worked. Good for that." Shannon's not listening.
I have two scapegoats. Children.
The very natural response is to try to not to take responsibility and blame someone else. But as a leader, we sort of should hold people to a higher standard. And I think leaders and journalists should try to be as helpful as possible, just like first responders. They have this higher duty during a pandemic. And, I think some of the reluctance to take the Asian, someone in the comments had pointed out a Malaysian doctor was quick to support masks. I know in Japan and South Korea as well, they were very quick on the uptake. I think it was an Asian thing in general to be very quick on masks. And what was the reason the West was so reluctant? They didn't want to learn a lesson from China, because they think, oh, we're smarter than Chinese doctors, we're American I don't know. That seems very petty and silly, but to think of the amount of lives that were lost is a real tragedy. I remember reading a study when it was only about 300,000 American deaths from COVID. Now it's over 750,000. And the study at the time said that 98%, the vast overwhelming majority of those deaths would have been preventable if the South Korean model, not even the Chinese model, because maybe they didn't want to say Chinese model for political reasons, but they said South Korea. If what South Korea had done for the lockdown had been used instead of Trump's sort of everyone run around and cough on each other model, they would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives, which is that's a huge deal. If every country had just followed China's lead and we had all worked together as productively as possible, Alex and I would have been able to go home and see our family a year ago. People would be back to normal. And there's all these unintended consequences where mental health is at stake. People are losing their businesses. People, I sympathize with people that say, I don't want to close my restaurant. That's my family's business for 50 years. It's my livelihood. And now they're the ones protesting the lockdown. But the irony is the lockdowns are extending the pandemic. And so you have this vicious cycle. In science, you call it a positive cycle, even if it's negative, just that, people breathing on each other, people resisting, people perpetuate the thing. I get it's very complicated, but the saddest thing for me, I think, and maybe to leave on this note, is that I think it disproportionately affects the poor and the working class. People that have a good job were able to work from home, whereas the heroes were the Meituan delivery people here, or the pizza delivery people in America or something. People that had to go to work in dangerous situations were the most likely ones to die. People that couldn't afford healthy food and might have a weight issue, or had a comorbidity that was predisposed. Often it's the working class that likes to smoke more, which is another comorbidity for COVID. And I think that the pandemic shed a real light on the problems and challenges of society, whether they're environmental, economic, class issues. And in a way, that's a gift to be able to see the issues we need to help to improve, to make a more equitable society. But it was definitely the people at the bottom that hit the hardest, and we should really support them. I think we need to vaccinate. Until we vaccinate the whole world, we're going to have more mutations possibly that could be very dangerous. We need to really work together, and that would be what would really end this.
I think that's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah, I think we would all agree that, in order to stop control the pandemic, we need to put politics aside and, move forward. We need the whole world to like work together, and we need to increase the vaccination rate, improve rapid testing ability to scale. We need to also have more restrict control on the borders of all countries. And most importantly, we need to protect and help the country that are in need and most vulnerable, while combating the virus. For example, the developing country, the African country, and some East Asian country. So I've recently read the news that China has donated over 1.8 billion doses of vaccine in total, and is projected to provide 2 billion doses of vaccine in the near future. So, and also China is prioritizing developing countries in vaccine donation. I would like to know, what are your opinion on this, and how do you think that is going to impact the results of our battle with COVID-19? Let's start with Alex.
I think it's great. You can never say a bad thing about donating stuff which is going to help people. Whether or not people are not whether or not everybody's going to take it, because there's a lot of people that they got the tinfoil hats out and they're like, it's the government. They're trying to track us. They're trying to do this, which is hilarious in itself, because all these people which think that there is these conspiracy theories behind vaccines actually post more information than they're worried about being given to themselves on Facebook voluntarily, like every day. It's almost hilarious. It's fantastic. But I think, like vaccines, like I said, like if you're donating them to the people that really need them, then what is there to say apart from that's fantastic? There is no discussion really needed. It's fantastic if you have the ability to help somebody that's less fortunate than yourself. That's a very good thing to be able to do. I think the masks thing might be a little bit more difficult as well, but not just because of people that are a bit tinfoil hat conspiracy, but because of culture. Like, for example, in China, I think China adopted the whole wearing a mask a lot easier, because it's always been culture here. Before the virus even came, people would always, I've got a cold, I'm wearing this mask. And it wasn't, people never saw it any differently. Whereas in England, the joke was always, before the pandemic, if you were wearing a mask, you could have got shot by the police. But if now you can get shot by the police for not having a mask. It's always been the stigma in a lot of Western countries that if you're wearing a mask or you're covering your face, it's for an untoward purpose. There's a reason. Like if you go into a shop in England before the pandemic and you're covering your face up, or you're wearing a hoodie with the hood up, people would instantly be like, this guy's up to no good. So I think there's a stigma attached to masks in the West, which also doesn't help. Apart from the tinfoil hat theories, I think there's something which people need to. It's hard for people to get used to that, I think.
Yeah, that's great insight. How about you, Kai?
So much to dig into there. I'll pick one or two things. I guess to bring it back to the vaccines to start before we get carried away on another interesting tangent, wild tangents. They were very fascinating I wish we had all day to talk about this. I think in terms of China donating billions of vaccines, I mean, again, like Alex said, no one could say that's a bad thing. I've actually seen some, maybe New York Times, BBC actually criticize China in the sense of saying like, you're just trying to suck up to other countries to be popular. That's why you're saving all those lives, which I think is preposterous. But if you're going to have a global arms race between China and the West, I would rather it be how many billions of vaccines can we give to developing countries rather than how can we build weapons or things that will hurt and kill people. So, I mean, great. Yeah. If that's the race they want to have to see who's the superior country, perfect. Give everybody vaccines. Everyone, China gave a lot of them. America gave a lot of them. UK gave a lot of them. And that's great. I think that's a good race to have as a positive outcome. I think it can really help a lot of countries, and it's very beneficial. We're still getting the news in many countries. There's the threats and the unknown of the new variants, including Omicron, right? We didn't have a chance to talk about that one yet. But actually, there's some good anecdotal science from South Africa and Botswana, I believe, where a lot of the studies have, the initial information is coming from, to say that it's actually possibly very mild. And that actually might be really, really good news. I know in China, no one's going to want to hear we should all get Omicron to end the pandemic because it's antithetical to the zero cases we've had. But in South Africa, it seems to be, I believe, as of a week or so ago, the studies I was reading, I've been doing a new blog and working on that, was that I think in 2 to 3 weeks, it went from 0% to 90% of the cases in Botswana. So it's incredibly infectious, which is a concern because Delta was already much more infectious than the Alpha and Beta. So if it can, in 2 weeks, dominate the Delta, that means it's incredibly contagious. But that being said, there was a very, very low rate of serious incidents. So if you had a mutation that ended up being incredibly infectious, became the dominant one, and almost nobody died, that works out great. And then you add to that vaccination rates, which keep people safe, and some of these new medicines from Pfizer, Merck, or the Chinese one that will help to fight it and reduce its ability to spread and infect. Maybe we can go see our family and travel again and get back to life next year. That would be ideal.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a wonderful conversation that we're having today. And thanks for everyone joining our live stream. Currently, I see 44 people joining our live stream. And so we're going to wrap that conversation today. And thanks to Alex and Kai joining our live stream and give wonderful conversations. And also please follow Alex from the YouTube channel, Alex Absolute. And also if you get a chance to read this interesting book from Kai, and it's about his diaries in quarantines in China. And please make sure that you follow us on YouTube channels and on Facebook and all those platforms to follow more things about China and also local news here in Chongqing.
Where can we get the book if we're in China?
In China, whatever you like to shop with, you can check out the JD or Taobao apps, Pinduoduo if you're looking for discounts. They all have it. Just put in Kai's diary. Okay. This is the Canadian edition about to come out, but they have this version, English and Chinese, and there's an ebook available on Amazon. And if anyone wants to follow me, it's at Jorakai, JORAHKAI on Twitter. And I have a blog I've been doing, my regular blog, jorakai.com. And then since the pandemic started, theinvisiblewar.co. And I have many stories of different people around the world talking about it in the past. And if anyone wants to do a blog for me from your part of the world, how you're still coping with it, I'm happy to hear from you, and I'll host your blog.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great. Make sure you get Kai's book. So thanks to everyone who joined our live stream today. And to, the topic of next week is going to be Chinese infrastructure. That's also going to be something that you might to tune in and listen to. So that's it, guys.
Okay, great. Stay safe out there, everybody. One thing, if I can mention one last thing, vitamin D.
Sure.
Get your sunshine, get your vitamin D. That was actually the one thing that I wish was talked about more. And again, sorry to throw that in the last moment, but there's so many studies that show if you have a healthy, you don't want to just drown in orange juice and whatever, but if you have a healthy level of vitamin D, it's really, really good for the body, and it's a lot harder to get sick even if you catch COVID. So stay healthy, everybody. Wear your masks.
Yes, stay healthy.
Vitamin D, get some sunshine, be well.
We'll see you next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.